Okay, people, today on the show, we're going to show you how to remove this rack as simple as it possibly can be. And for the moment, we're going to discuss some of the problems that you might be having. You might be having a power steering leak right here, right here. You could have a busted actuator here on the power steering. A lot of times we see broken mounting bolts right here and right here. But in this situation, it's because somebody was working on the automobile before and moved the line, and then it started rubbing up against something, the exhaust or something like that, and eventually wore a hole into it. And it's darn near impossible to repair this line on the vehicle. And because there's so many other things that could be going on, I've seen a little bit of moisture here on the ends. It could have bad seals. Even though them seals are actually fairly easy to replace, you could do that and rebuild this yourself. When the rebuilder rebuilds these and remanufactures them, it probably only costs them about $5. I mean, usually it's just the seals on the outside. When they have a busted rack bolt right here, they may not give you back your core if they notice it. So keep that in mind when you're taking this apart. If it's busted there, you're probably better off just returning the core and not saying anything if you want to get your core money back. I mean, they make a terrible amount of money on these things. This one was approximately $200 or so, and it was sourced from a local parts store. Just keep that in mind. You could simply rebuild it as well yourself in your driveway and save yourself a couple of $100s. I've never personally done it, but I do know it's possible. If any other person can do it, I'll guarantee you can do it too.
Now, before you people start losing your freaking minds and going, "Oh, Clay, that's not an Oldsmobile, that's not a Pontiac." Well, it's this great conspiracy about profits at these large automobile manufacturers that make these exactly the same. So don't be crying to me until you actually do the work that this wasn't the correct procedure for your Buick, your Oldsmobile, your Chevy Impala, all the different things that this should darn near be identical and removable, because everything underneath the sheet metal of your car is probably the same. It's just the outside that looks a little bit different. My name is Clay with the Clay Way here in Muskegon, Michigan, and if this video is helpful, please consider subscribing, clicking the notification, sharing my videos, and giving me them sweet old thumbs up. And if you have a question for me, I answer them for absolutely free. I don't collect any information. I'm not interested in your baby mama drama, and I can't help you with that pain that you feel when you pee. But I may be able to help you with your automobile. Just look me up on Clay's AC and Auto Repair on the Facebook Messenger. I try to help everyone that I possibly can. And remember, if anyone else can do it, I promise you can do it too. If you want to help the show out, please consider buying something from our merch store, like a hat or one of my sweet shirts, whatever you want to do. You can also donate. But if you can't do any of that and you're broke just like me, you can turn on the Sweet Clay Way playlist at nighttime. Just turn that little volume down and let them suckers play from front to back. That helps me out a lot. You might dig my tips and tricks video playlist. That's pretty good, I think. These videos are okay. I do tackle some serious issues that are more complicated than just doing your brake pads on your cars. So you may find some stuff in there that's pretty neat. But thanks for listening to me ramble. Let's get on with the show, and we'll show you how to get this thing out.
Okay, so in this video, we're going to show you how to remove the rack and pinion steering out of your Buick that has the 3.8. Doesn't matter if you have a Buick Park Avenue, Buick Century, Buick Regal, Oldsmobile, Pontiac, Grand Prix. If it has the 3.8, this procedure should be very close, if not damn near identical. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to support the vehicle up on jack stands. Up on the bottoms of the doors, there's little pinch welds. I'm assuming most people that are doing this are a little bit skilled or have worked on automobiles in the past. This is not a hard job. I think anybody can do it. I mean, if I can do it, you can certainly do it as well. But it's one of them things. So we're going to take the 19 millimeter lug nuts off then once we've got it supported. And we're going to first start working on the tie rod. Now, I'm not going to go to both sides and show you everything. You're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Now, with removing the tie rod, we're going to want to turn the wheel all the way counterclockwise, or all the way clockwise, so this tie rod is towards the back. But we need to remember to put the tie rod back inside there before we move the wheel again to get to the other side. Now, I could only find one other video on doing this procedure, and the guy skipped a lot of parts, didn't show you a lot of things, and he had the whole subframe out of here. I don't think that that's going to be necessary, but if it is, you're probably not going to see this video because his was fine enough, even though he didn't show you all the stuff I'm going to show you. Down here, we're going to need to straighten our cotter key that's in there. And once we get it semi-straight, it doesn't have to be perfectly straight, we can take a pair of wire cutters and put it up inside there like this, and then use this to pull it out. Now, if you can't get down inside there because maybe it's jammed in there real hard, you can take a pick and put it up in the eyelet and get it back a little bit so you can grab a hold of it with them wire cutters. Now we're going to go ahead and remove all of this stuff. I already had this taken apart before I decided to start shooting this video and make something that was hopefully a little bit cleaner. We're going to take a 17mm socket and hopefully an impact so you don't spin the tie rod, and we'll remove the nut. There's going to be a nut and a washer that comes off of there. Now we're going to take a big sledgehammer. So now you want to bring the hammer back and you want to strike it right here. You do not want to strike it right here, and you don't want to go underneath the tie rod. This will come in useful later on in the future if you ever need to remove a tie rod and not destroy it. With our new rack and pinion, we're obviously going to get a new one. We're not too worried about that, but this procedure is the simplest way to get a tie rod, ball joint out without destroying something. So you're going to hit it really hard. This one's already been out, so it only took a couple taps, but if you get a good swing on it, you're going to heat this area up, and if you use one arm to pull this up, it's going to pop right out and you're going to love me forever. Now with that removed, we're going to put it back inside the slot, and there's a reason for doing this. You're going to put it back inside the slot and move the wheel so you can go to the other side and do the exact same procedure. The reason that you're not going to leave it hanging and then just turn the wheel so you can expose the other side is because if you do that, you're going to throw off the balance of the steering wheel. So when you go to reinstall your rack and pinion, your steering wheel is going to be off. Your steering wheel could still be off, don't get me wrong, but more than likely doing the procedure this way is going to allow it not to be. Then once you get the other side off, you should be able to quite simply go in, push them up, and then when you go to reinstall your rack, it'll be square and straight with your wheels. Now looking underneath, we're going to take a long pry bar and we're going to put it up on this boot and move it away. It's not going to come all the way down like this yet because your nuts and your bolts are going to be tight on your subframe. Now, if we take a look at my subframe, I'm approximately 1 inch to 1.5 inches away from the body. That's because I have both subframe bolts loosened. They are 18mm and they're located in the center of here. I remove one at a time and lower it down. I do not remove the whole bolt. When you go to remove the one side, you're going to see that this frame is going to move down about 1/2 inch or so. Once you remove the other side, it's going to lower down. And as long as you make sure this bolt is up in there a couple of threads, you'll be just fine. So don't remove it all the way, but on the very first one, you can unscrew it to see where it's at. It's not going to fall down on you, and it's not going to fall down even if you remove both of the bolts because there's still bolts in the front of it holding it up. Now, once you've loosened both 18mm bolts on both sides, it's going to drop down exactly the way mine is. Then you'll be able to take the pry bar and move this bushing off of here. And if your wheels are straight, this 11mm bolt that you can see right there is going to be pointed right at you. And you'll be able to simply take an extension with an 11mm socket on it, get up in there, and get right on the bolt and remove the bolt completely. So we'll go ahead and remove the bolt completely since we're all the way up to speed where I stopped at when I decided to start making this video. Okay, so this is the bolt that we removed up out of there. Now this is a really important bolt. It's a weird size and you don't want to lose it or you're going to be out at the self-picky part pulling one of these bolts out of a rack, because I've never found one with an 11mm head, but it's got a shank on there that runs through the rack, and I'll show you that at the end, and we'll also explain to you not only what happened to this rack, but why it happened. So now we're going to take a long pry bar, once again, that we used to remove the bolt, the plastic bushing. With the bolt removed, we should be able to get up in there, and with the pry bar and with the cradle hanging down, push up on that, and you can see I removed that knuckle off of there. So when we go to take the rack out, it'll slide out. Now we need to move to the top of the vehicle. I've got a mat laid down here so I don't hurt the engine and or my fat belly. And I've got some crow's feet right here. These are crow's feet, or at the very least some line wrenches, which will be a serious problem. Now we need to use these because more than likely you will strip off these lines if you do not use them. The lines on the rack that we need to remove are 18mm. Now down here are the 2 lines that we need to remove. There are a total of 4 lines bolted to where the power steering fluid goes into the rack. These 2 larger lines are the ones that need to be removed, and they're right here behind the rear cylinder head and exhaust manifold. Okay, so now I've got the hot setup. I've got a little wobble on there, 3/8 wobble, little 4-inch extension if I remember correctly. And we're going to put this on first, and then we're going to use other extensions to get it out to an area where we can break the lines free easily. Now we've got our extension and our wobble on there, and that gives us a little bit of control and leverage to move that up and down. So now we're going to hook up our other extensions, break these lines free. Luckily, because they're fine threaded, more than likely once we get them loose, we may be able to spin them out finger tight, especially if we used a little bit of penetrant to get up into the threads. All right, so there's our setup all the way down. We're going to use both hands to get this loose. I think we got her loose. Now the unfortunate part is once we get her loose, we've got to go back down inside there and move it again because it's a crow's foot and they're a pain in the butt, but they help you get stuff loose. So I'm going to do that. You need to do that on both lines, and then them lines will be removed and we can move on to the next set. Like I said, right after I loosened it up, one turn, I'm able to pick it up, and then I'm able to pull it out and move it out of my way so I can get on the other one back there and start removing it. The second one that I'm removing is a little bit stiffer, but I'm just going to take a stubby wrench, and now I should be able to get it in there enough to move it and get the second line out. Now once we remove the lines completely, we can pull them away from the rack where they go in. And then moving over to the other side below the power steering pump and the alternator, we're going to find a little plastic clip that holds one of the lines onto the rack line. We will remove that plastic clip, and then we should move on to the next procedure. That clip is right here, hooked to this line. You need to remove that off there, and then you'll feel one of the lines totally moving. Now we're going to move from the top to the bottom and take out the 2 mounting bolts that hold on the rack and pinion, or in my situation, put them in. Okay, if you have an 18mm long quickie wrench and a 15mm long quickie wrench, you can put the 15mm long wrench right up here onto the 15mm bolt head, and you can take the 18mm and loosen the nut. This will hold it into place and make that nut and that bolt easier to get off. You use this one to ratchet the nut off. Now moving to underneath the vehicle, we're going to remove the bolts from the rack. Now working from the driver's side, I've got a 15mm and an 18mm. We're just going to loosen these bolts and nuts up so we can move the sway bar up out of our way. Okay, so in order to remove the bolts out of the rack that are holding it into place, we need to remove the stabilizer link pin. Now don't worry too much, these are going to often break, but They're very, very cheap at the parts store, and if they're already broken, you need to replace them because they help keep your wheels flat when you're turning. When you turn, the body roll wants to lift up the tire on your passenger side if you're turning to the left, and the same thing on the right. So this bar keeps the tires in contact with the roadway, allowing them to wear evenly. So these are 13 millimeters on the bottom and 13 millimeters on the top. We're going to take that out and do that on both sides. That'll allow us to move the bar up into this position, which when we go to take the bolts out, will allow the bolts to come out. Okay, so I was able to get my nut and the washer off and the upper bushing off of here, but I was not able to get the pen to slide through the rubber bushings on the bottom. So I'm just going to cut it off because these things are so stinking cheap, and I'm tired of sitting here hitting it with a hammer and it not coming out. I am super annoyed at this moment. This is not taking the 3 minutes it normally does. Okay, so you actually want to cut through the center plastic part first. Trying to cut through the rubber boot is not a good idea because it just burns up your blade. But if you go through the center, you'll be able to pop it down and pop it out. Once we have both stabilizer links removed, then we pick up our tie rod and we set it aside so we can remove the sway bar out of the way. Of course not. In extreme situations, you're going to have to grab a pry bar and pry up on the sway bar like this. This is actually okay. It's just the bushings are a little bit tight in there and wrapped on the sway bar really, really well. It was a tough thing getting this up, but I got it. Okay, so with the bar up and out of the way, we can simply remove the bolt without removing the whole sway bar. This is nice. Now here comes the big moment that you've all been waiting for. Can we get this rack and pinion out? I know I certainly hope that I didn't waste adding hours of time to my job to not be able to get it out. We've got both bolts out. We can stick this up underneath there and just like that, just hit it down and pop it up and hopefully go to the other side and do that. If you've listened to the words that I said earlier, I told you to remove both sides and that I wasn't going to show you. There was no difference in removing both bolts out of here on either side. The biggest problem that I worry about is when I raise this rack up, that it pushes it up into my knuckle. I'm not too worried about that because I made sure that the knuckle was pulled off of the steering shaft that it connects to on the rack. So it's not going to push back up inside there, but it is going to push up into the plastic up there at the top. But we should still be able to get that out. At least that's the hopes. If we make sure it's out of the pocket over there, and we make sure it's out of the pocket over here, we should start being able to pull it. It looks like I could pull it out through the passenger side as well, but I'm going to do it over here on the driver's side because I'm going to need to maneuver it a little bit to get it around right here. Okay, so I've totally removed that bolt over there without jacking it up or anything. Now I'm going to try to remove this bolt. I have the subframe jacked up on here because I don't know if it's going to happen that it'll drop down really far, if it's just going to drop down a couple of inches. I'm hoping it drops down just a couple of inches because that's all I really need to get this rack out of here. And I'll let you know if you actually needed this jack. I don't think it could hurt anything having it there. Okay, Cameron, go ahead and slowly let the jack down. Whoa, 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 that's good, that's good, that's good. Don't move it.
I'm trying to.
Okay, lock it back into place. Damn, the kid don't know his own strength. Like freaking Bam Bam. Okay, so that's definitely dropped this down enough for us to remove the rack. There's no doubt in my mind that we'll be able to pop that thing up out of there. And we didn't have to remove the whole subframe. Everything I did on camera, you guys will be able to accomplish at home on a set of jack stands. So now we're going to pull this bad lad out of here. So my only possible concern could be that it could bend the mounts up here by letting it down too far, but it's theoretically not going to fall out because it's still connected to the struts and the motor mounts at the top and stuff underneath the hood. So we don't have to worry too much if somebody, you know, maybe lets the jack down too far. Wink, wink, that guy. But that's all good. I mean, didn't hurt anything. You've seen a mistake actually happen on camera, so no big deal. So now we're just going to take the pry bar, pry it up out of its pockets again, and we should be able to slide it right out of here. I don't believe there's any electrical connectors to this one, so I'm going to slide it out, but I can't do the camera and slide it out at the same time. Having an assistant over on the other side holding up the tie rod is certainly not going to hurt anything. I'm going to try to do without it so Cameron can actually film us bringing it out. So Cameron, you'll be right about there. And then I lie. There is an electrical connector literally right here. So it looks like we need to figure out what this connects to. And there's a little connector right up in here. Can you get up in there, Cameron, and see that? So it's right up underneath here, and I'll show you guys. And gals. Okay, so we have an electrical connector right there, and the clip just simply pushes up. You're able to push right up on this one right here, and then pull back on it at the same time and disconnect it. And voila, we have her out. She's out. Well, I certainly knew there was something wrong with this, but now that I'm looking at it, I can see that something was wearing on there. And how that happened was somebody over time was working on this rack or working around it, and they bent these lines out of the way, but they didn't bend it back to where it was supposed to go. So it wore a hole in there. Quite often, I see the high pressure line break on these. That is extremely common. Now, normally I would just repair this line and put this rack and pinion back in, but I see a little bit of moisture on the outside here and the outside here, which tells me that the O-rings that are down inside here are probably bad as well. And because this is such a significant amount of work to actually get this out, I'm thinking that replacing it, even though it's like $200 or $300, is probably going to be the best scenario. Now, normally when you replace these, they do not come with tie rods. Sometimes they do, but that is the reason that we did not want to destroy these tie rods, taking them out, because we can reuse them. And if you had to buy 2 tie rods for this, you'd end up spending another $40 or $50, maybe even $60 by the time you purchase them. Not only is it going to keep money in your pocket, but keep people out of your own corn store. Whoa, was that neat?
Or what? Hopefully you guys got your rack out of there. I'm sure you did if you tried it out, because anybody else could do it. You can do it too.
Remember, please
consider subscribing, clicking the notification, sharing my videos, and giving me them sweet old thumbs up. Don't be the next of them. Be the first of you.
God bless and
have the best of days.